Hello, friends. Welcome to the third thing of whatever this thing is I'm doing. The third quest log, the third campaign diary. Still figuring out the name. I might go with quest log. But we played Pathfinder a couple of weeks ago. It's been a couple of weeks. A couple of people couldn't make it last week, so skipped last week's video since I didn't want to get too ahead of the prep. But we are hopefully playing tomorrow, God willing. No one said we're not so far. No one's come up with, any emergencies. So I think we're good. Usually, if we get to 24 hours beforehand and no one's said anything yet, then we're all set. But, fingers crossed. Today, I'm just gonna be talking about kind of the last session, how things went, what occurred, what I thought went well, what I thought went badly, which it was a dungeon crawl last week, so it was pretty straightforward, really. And then after that, I have a dungeon that I'm going to be tracing out on Dungeon Fog. Let's turn off the ARC spoilers. We're not there yet. We're not to the spoilers yet. Yeah, we'll be using this wonderful software called Dungeon Fog to trace out a map from this PDF adventure I've been running. So I think last time, the last thing I kind of touched on was just them getting to this church. The players arriving here for some investigation. The church was called out by the mayor as being corrupted by these cultists. The mayor didn't know exactly that they were cultists, but this shady organization that's been up to no good in the town, causing a lot of problems. People have been disappearing, coming back different or not coming back at all. Other people have just been moving out and leaving the town forever. Yeah. So this was kind of their next stop to investigate after being ambushed at the inn. They picked a poor place to sleep for the night, and this was where they proceeded to investigate on the mayor's tip the next day. Originally, they just came to ask some questions, and then, as happens when you're playing D&D, it turned into, it turned into a whole thing. A couple of the players ran in here. They were in this kind of main center receiving room, main worshiping room, and trying to get some information from the head priest there. A couple of other players managed to sneak in here after rolling pretty well on their stealth checks, and they were just, they picked kind of the most boring room to start with, because it's just a dining room connected by a little kitchen with like some prayer rooms over here, and so there's nothing inherently shocking that should necessarily happen here. But they continued to wander through here, through this back hall. They heard like breathing through a very good seek check through here. They knew that there were people in some of these doors. And had they just opened the door, these cultist monks would have attacked and kind of removed all doubt that they were evil. But instead, the players, of course, decide to just kick in the door to start with. So technically, this fight was on the players for initiating. And they barged in there. The monks retaliated, as they would have done anyway, but as was natural for when your door gets kicked in. So that left some question as to, like, are we just beating up monks, like innocent monks for fun? Like, was this was this the wrong move? And so that there was that question hanging in the air for a while. I kind of like that. One clue that they kind of had, I guess, was as soon as the head priestess heard fighting coming from through these walls and around this corner, she booked it this way while the other players went this way to help. And then like locked the door behind her, which I suppose would be a natural thing to do when you hear fighting break out. But so they cleaned up in here. The head priestess ran up the stairs, basically just in an attempt to get the players to follow her up there so that she could then kind of drop back down. This church has a suspicious number of trapdoors in it. So she knows that there is a trapdoor here. So her plan was to just run upstairs, run through the upstairs, drop down here once she heard fighting break out behind her upstairs, and then, like, leave. And that worked pretty well. So, yeah, players cleaned up here. This is, like, the most boring level, really. There's not much to look at. They did, of course, they checked this room, and this room, and this room, and this room. Saw nothing in all of those. And then ignored the room that has a secret trapdoor to go to the basement. Because, of course. I had trouble holding myself back from, like, making fun of them for not checking that room, just letting them do what they were going to do. I just thought it was really funny and had to stifle some laughs. One player, though, did... They're already kind of suspicious of this priest. So one player that had a movement speed buff on them, they charged back this way and this way, basically following the head priestess. Like, burst through this door. Again, went north and then up the stairs. You will see here that I have typed door because it's just a wall there. There's just a wall. I forgot to put a door in, and so I needed a reminder that this isn't a secret passage. This isn't anything. It's just a door that I forgot. So that was awkward to explain. Anyway, as you can see up here, there are a couple of friendly ghouls that were chilling in this room, guarding it, waiting for... they were sitting in this corner, these far corners, watching the door, and the player that was charging after just went around this corner, charged through the door, successfully rolled to break the door down, just tore it off its hinges, and then saw these two ghouls sitting in the corner, just staring at him. And they saw ghouls in the previous little mini dungeon that they went through. And they made a pretty big deal about seeing these undead that could, like, convert large populations into more of themselves, basically. You know, where there's one ghoul, there can quickly be several more, which seems to be the case for a lot of undead. But whatever. You would think some of them would have a slightly different shtick. However, so he was pretty shocked when he saw them. He was expecting them to attack, so he, like, readied an action for them to lunge forward and strike at him, and he would just, like, full combo them back as soon as they got in range. But that did not occur. They were just sitting there staring and apparently waiting for something to happen, and he sat there for a long time trying to discern what that might be. And if any players do watch this before they get back to Eden, this is a slight spoiler, but there's a symbol, there's a sign that cultists have made in front of the players, a fairly obvious sign, but I've tried to hide it fairly well, and they take their left palm and they put it on their forehead, and that is the sign that you are in the cult. So they've all been doing things like brushing their hand through their hair, or, like, face palming, or, you know, there's been a lot of forehead slapping with left palms specifically that they haven't picked up on. So he wasn't aware of that symbol. None of the players have mentioned or noticed or said anything about it. They have not noticed this strange behavior. So he just stood there long enough for all of the other players to kind of congregate in the main room, move over into this hallway, and then start arguing about what was going on. One, like, checked in here, saw that there was, like, it was just a bedroom. Another one was, like, blocking the doorway, being like, hey, what's going on? He arrived to the scene late, you see, because he missed the previous session. He was like, why are we punching monks? What's the deal here? Why have we stormed this church so violently without having hard answers to this question? And they're all four of the other players are sitting here debating this, and, like, what they should do, and like, maybe they should go talk to the constable. And finally, the fifth player upstairs turns around and he's like, hey guys, we got undead up here. And that, you know, lit a fire under everyone else's ass to, like, get up there and see what was going on. So they arrive at the top of the stairs. They're like, "Hey, interesting. Why aren't these things attacking? Can we figure it out?" And they could not. Eventually, they decide to just tumble into the room. The rogue character does. They're just going to, like, charge forward and attack. So they step into the threshold, and as they stepped inside without making the symbol, the ghouls leapt into action. Sorry, I've got a very, like, kind of stuffy throat today, so I might mute and cough a lot, but I'll try to minimize that. Yeah, so they stepped inside, ghouls attack. They're like, oh, okay, well, that's alarming. That's unfortunate. And they proceeded to they took care of these ghouls without too much trouble. They had 20 health. It wasn't a big deal. It was only 2 of them. I knew that there were slightly bigger fights coming up, so it was just, the entire point of the ghouls was to, one, cause noise, alert folks further in that something was going on. And second, they were only expecting snoopy townspeople to show up here, which, like, 2 ghouls would have jumped on a single townsperson very easily and, like, taken him out. But 5 fairly well-stocked adventurers are another story, especially at level 2. And, yeah, so they were taken care of without too much issue. They proceeded to cautiously investigate the next couple of rooms. You can't see it now. The kind of original state here is that I wish I should take, like, before and after screenshots of these things. But Cleric was originally in here. This is his room. This is his creepy room with, like, nail scratches and painted symbols and words all over the place. In this room, there were 6 lizard folk just waiting. They were very frail. I was stealing minion rules from 4th edition, really. So they all had 1 health and otherwise had the regular stats of a lizard folk warrior of some kind. I mentioned this in the last video, but they were billed as goblins in the adventure. And I kind of decided that I wanted to unify the henchmen, because the adventure talks about, like, goblins and lizard folk and troglodytes and a bunch of other random creatures, a lot of snakes, which is fine. There's some theming going on with a lot of it, but the goblins felt extremely out of place. I cut out goblins, cut out troglodytes, and really there are ghouls to unify any undead that are there. There are lizard folk to kind of represent any of the more monstrous henchmen that would have been around, like semi-monstrous, semi-intelligent henchmen. And then there's, like, the townsfolk cultists, who are kind of the weak, like, the weak fodder, really. And then a few other miscellaneous monsters. Used to call troglodytes trogdoils. I like it. Actually, that's pretty good. But yeah, I used to think troglodyte was, like, a wild slur or something, because I didn't realize that it was, like, I didn't have any idea where it came from. I didn't know it was, like, a D&D creature and not, you know. So that's my background with that word. So yeah, condensed all the minions is the point of that. Made it so it wasn't going in so many weird directions. This is an old adventure, so kind of wanted to tighten it up, clean it up, make it fit in my setting and what was going on a little better, and, like, tighten the scope. And yeah, this is a pre-made adventure. I forgot to mention that this time, but it's a pre-made adventure that I'm converting to my campaign world, basically. And we're almost done, I think, with the adventure. I think they've got maybe 2 or 3 more sessions. So I will try not to throw too many spoilers out until we get to the, like, prep part. So yeah, they started to investigate the next couple of rooms. Came in here. They did not spot. They all rolled, like, below 15s on their what am I the check, perception check. That's the one. All right, they rolled poorly on their perception checks. They would have needed to roll very high to spot there are kind of like slits in these walls where the lizard folk are peeking through, seeing what's going on, spying on them, and they open up into like secret doors. So that is why they are marked. A couple of them went and checked this room. A couple checked this. Lizard folk didn't know how many people were present, how many people were in the party, and their whole thing is to wait until all of the party members are in like this room, preferably this hallway, and then they all spring and come at them from every side, basically. They didn't know there was a fifth party member, which isn't hugely impactful here, but about 4 got in here. The lizard folk jumped out and struck at them, to the player's surprise. Got a few attacks off, kind of a okay amount of damage, enough to kind of like scare the players a little bit. And then the players called for their fifth companion to come in, and he kind of got a nice flank with his bombs. He's a goblin alchemist, so he's able to do a little bit of AoE damage. But yeah, they kind of serve their purpose of a little quick encounter to kind of break up the otherwise investigatory action. They were taken out pretty quickly, got a couple of attacks off. That's all they really needed to do, especially with an event that happened later with this cleric. So they finished them off. They saw that this room is like, it used to be a supply room for the church, and now it's been converted into some kind of torture chamber. A lot of torture devices, like a couple of blood splatters, and a cage. If they still had doubts about whether this church had evil shit going on after running into ghouls, this eliminated all doubt. And then they picked up some documents that I was able to use to kind of like seed some ambiguous, some arbitrary information that I wanted them to have as they were looking through those. And they Ludwig, the goblin alchemist, he found some documents in here talking about the torture that was going on in here. Basically, this cleric who used to be writing scriptures about Dinala, where the goddess of life that this church worships. All of his other writings became pretty incoherent after some point in time where, spoilers, he was converted to the cult. And then after that point, like his other writings degraded, and the only writing that still made sense was like writing about torture and the steps to like most easily get people to convert to the cult. And I just kind of hand-waved that. I didn't get into too much detail, too much gruesome detail there, but it gave a couple of like examples, knowing that none of my players are extremely squeamish about torture. So, and some of them like the more vivid descriptions, so I threw out like 1 or 2 to give them the idea, and then moved on. So they opened this room. They saw some mysterious scratches on the outside, and then opened the door and saw some less ambiguous scratches on the inside. Well, not less ambiguous, I guess, but slightly more intelligible. None of them really mean too much. There's just like a couple of things that I thought were nice touches. This like welcome home that maybe originally was written earnestly when, this guy was converted to the cult, and then scratched out the home part later. But the conversion to the cult did not go smoothly for him. So yeah, they confronted the cleric in this room. He did not immediately recognize them as threats because his job here has been pretty straightforward. People come here to be converted, so he just thought one of them were here to be converted. After they rolled a, again, very high deception check, they're really hot and cold on their rolls this session, I can tell you that. And I was very hot on the rolls. I rolled like a ton of 20s on the NPCs, except for his sense motive check. That was very bad. So they're like, hey, yeah, we're here to convert this guy, and they point to my brother's player. They're like, we'll help us prepare him for his new life in the cult. So he brings them back out here, or they bring him back out here. Their idea is to like push him into this cage, and then one of them decides to go, like, that would have mostly worked, I think. One of them decides to go off script and try to stab him. The rogue, again. The rogue is a little fighty. Goes in for the stab. Here's the clink. Like, they're expecting it to just meet flesh. They are not expecting this guy to have high AC. They hear the clink of a chain shirt under it, raising his AC to something. He has, like, decent dex and a chain shirt. His AC was something like 18 or 19. Not extremely easy to hit. It was a +1 chain shirt as well, so they enjoyed finding that out later. So he looked down at the stab wound and, like, points at them. He shouts, just blasphemes at them, and then starts casting something. One of the players tries to... Sorry, I shouldn't make faces. Tries to, like, deceive him again by being like, hey, rogue friend, Eve, why did you stab him? Why did you stab our friend who was going to convert this other guy to the cults? Like, well, what have you done? And the cleric wasn't having any of that. It's pretty hard to get friendly with someone who your friend just stabbed. It's a little difficult. He also did not roll exceptionally well on my hidden check. So even if he did, it would have been like a 30 or something, or like probably would have had to do a natural 20, which did not occur. Yeah, big whelp indeed. So then combat broke out. They had a chance or two to attack him first. They rolled well on their initiative. And while they were doing that, I was just looking through his spell list, and I was like, oh, okay, like, hold person, that doesn't really exist in here, but I can do something with it. Like, all right, heal, obviously. I can probably switch it so that he has harm instead, so you can just reach out and touch him for damage. And then I got to his, like, 3rd level spells, which he has for his boss character. He has higher level spells. And Raised Dead is there. And I was like, there's some dead things about. There are some dead lizard men over here. So, kind of impromptu. I was pretty happy with this. He just starts casting. And once he gets cast off, no one interrupts it or anything. No one has attacks of opportunity even in the room, so no chance to interrupt. I kind of make it slightly broken. He has a slightly overpowered version of Raised Dead. 4 of the dead lizard men rise again, basically with stats of, like, skeletons. Or, you know, acting as skeletons, because their flesh at that point is mostly just a covering. And they start stamping out. They have all the stats they did before, but now they have more than 1 health. They are no longer just minions, because I had a feeling the cleric was not going to last very long. They had more health, and they had a resistance to, is it piercing? I think it's piercing, and a weakness to bludgeoning. Kind of standard skeleton stuff. If the cleric had lived long enough to direct them, one of them would have walked over here to grab this axe, which would have just been a higher damage threat than their spears. That didn't happen, so they took out the cleric before he got to act again, as happens sometimes with your big boss monsters. He wasn't supposed to be particularly scary, so I didn't work out a bunch of, like, reactions for him or anything. He served his purpose by the time he died. His new purpose. And so they had a pretty good fight with the skelefied lizard men, who were having their flesh kind of, like, melt from their bones as combat was going on. And, you know, a couple of their stabs that were misses were described as, like, sinking into their flesh, but not hindering the skeletons in any way. And yeah, I think it was a pretty cool encounter. I really liked the flavor of it, and the players were pretty into it. So, like, 3 or 4 of the players finished that off, while 1 tried to get through this secret door that they found. And inside, people who were here last week may remember the boy I mentioned, who's kind of, like, taking the place... He's taking the place of one of the plot characters in this. There's, like a villager girl whose, like, parents turned her over to the cult after they were converted, and this is kind of my stand-in for that. I retooled it to insert an NPC that is important to my story. Just this boy that was brought here by one of the family members who owns the town. She like kind of picked him up under mysterious circumstances that the players have not discovered yet. So he revealed that he was brought to someplace in the swamp, and he was going to be converted. He resisted in some way or was basically refused, gave him trouble. So the cult leader, the head priestess, was like, just feed him to the crocodiles. We'll be done with him. Just, get rid of him. And the head cleric, or not head cleric, but this cleric, creepy torture man, he kind of took a liking to this boy and decided to lock him in with his other possessions, including basically just a handful of poorly carved statues of his that he carved, and then a very fine statue of a snake with a human face, or a humanoid face, at least. That was much higher quality than the rest. Yeah. So they retrieve the boy. They let him out. They're like, "All right, we need to see if the head priestess is in this church somewhere. We need to keep looking." And they were like, "Boy, stay here." And he was like, he just looked at the markings on the ground. And he was like, "No, I won't do that. Any other room but here." And they were like, "All right, fine, come with us." And they proceeded to. They found this trapdoor. This trapdoor was open, actually, from when the priestess ran through, so it was just hanging open. And when they dropped back down, this door was open, and this door was open, so it was pretty obvious that the head priestess had left. However, one of the players described themselves as just jumping down the hole, which I kind of was hoping to happen. I have a note right here. Trapdoor to basement. Rings hollow when stepped on. Falling from the room downstairs, this door crashes open. I had a feeling this would happen. Player's like, all right, well, I'm just going to jump down the hole. And I'm like, all right, you are specifically not climbing down or anything? And they're like, nope. So I'm like, all right, so you land. It's a pretty hard landing. And then the floor below you gives way. And they're like, oh, crap. They're like, yeah, you fall prone on like a platform below you. More cold stone lies under the trapdoor that you just broke through. Gave him some fall damage for that, of course. And that is how they discovered that there is a whole basement section, which it was like basically just the entire purpose of this basement appears to be giving more information about like the only interesting things in here. There's like lizard folk appear that you can kill for no big payoff, really. And there's like there's a dead cleric in here that you can discover by going through this trapdoor and finding him, and it just kind of gives a little bit of information about how long the cult has been in action and like kind of when it started if they roll well, which yeah, they did. So a little bit of information there. There's kind of a ogre here for no reason other than to again like smash people who walk in without being cult members. So they open this door. They heard like the crunching of his feet stamping on these bones. And he like leaned around the corner just enough to see that player walks here. Ogre sticks out his head and is just staring at him, much like the ghouls were staring at him up above, waiting for some kind of action, some kind of confirmation. And he did not see the confirmation. And as soon as the player like drew their weapon, he charged forward, shouting, just like reaching for him, saying "Food!" It's like, and yeah, they took pretty quick care of him. He's not statted up very high, even in the adventure. It's like a 2E, like a D&D 2E adventure or something. So he's statted up as like 10 HP or something. So you can see for Pathfinder, I bumped him up to like 25 health, which is it's an okay amount of health. But 5 players beating on you, it's not going to last very long. So they made pretty quick work of him. They found another trapdoor here that they would have discovered earlier in the monk prayer room if they had been a little more careful, I guess. And then they just made their way through this catacomb. They found the dead cleric. They found a couple of the trapdoors and everything in here. And then they triggered. There is right here I don't remember what it's called. I don't even think it has a Pathfinder monster right now. But it's basically just a mushroom that if you get within like 10 feet of it, it just screams. It's an alarm. It's an alarm and a mushroom. Yeah. So, of course, these players being my players, one of them walked right down the stairs. They're like, what is this mushroom? Let me get close to investigate. They got here, it screams. It very specifically echoes down the hall. And they're like, well, great. So if there's anything down here, they know we're here now. And they just leave the mushroom. I'll probably have it scream again when they come back. I think that'll be cute because they didn't do anything with it. So they wandered down this hallway. They saw one lizard man going into this door. That's kind of that's what I gave them to be like, these people know you're here. And just setting up that they were trying to ambush. There was a lizard man here. There's one in here. And there were two around this corner. One with a Retribution Axe, which is a +1 magic axe that, for one, a two-handed axe already does a ton of damage. It's 1d12. And this guy had I think I gave him 4 strength. So, pretty chunky. Most of them funneled right on in to here. One opened this door to, yeah, I think it was this door first. But point being, they sprung the trap. The lizard folk all rolled particularly good initiative, so they had a lot of time to kind of maneuver back behind the players here. The two flankers, and then these ones kind of popped out and started attacking as well. So it was pretty good chaos. So that was a good setup. Yeah. There's something satisfying about being like, here is a definite trap, and then having your players just confidently walk up and spring it. And I think 2, maybe 3 people went unconscious. It was a good little brawl, and a couple of situations someone got knocked down with that axe. The Retribution Axe has a cool kind of thing. It starts out showing the skull of a human, and then once someone strikes the wielder, the skull turns into the skull of whatever race that creature happens to be. So, and then once it does that, it deals an extra, I think an extra point of damage to that creature on top of all of the other damage that a two-handed axe does. So just kind of neat, early buff that's not too wild, but a little more exciting and a little more interesting than, just here's a +1 sword with no enchantments, Yeah, so there was also a crit with that axe. I rolled many 20s that night. There's a crit with the axe. It brought a player down to nearly nothing. They started to run away, got chased. They went unconscious. There was a couple serious death rolls for once, and it was great. It was tense, and the players seemed to really dig that combat. And one of the characters, the one that almost went unconscious, Solus, he was making a big deal out of protecting the kid who was in the back, kind of intelligently moving back down the hall when he saw someone retreating. These lizards were more buff than the ones up here. They had full health. They had stronger stats. They were meant to be kind of the endgame boss, the boss of this church, the big threat in the basement. And as such, they gave pretty decent rewards. 20 gold, which is a decent chunk for Pathfinder. They gave not a brooch of shielding. I forgot what I gave the players, so if they didn't write it down and they ask me next session, who knows what'll happen. Yep. Maybe I haven't. Maybe I think one of them wrote it down, and if they don't, maybe I have it in notes somewhere, but that's doubtful. So, Anyway, they got the axe, and they got a +1 chain shirt that actually saved someone from being hit immediately, so that's a nice payoff. And that's kind of where they ended the session. Yeah. Still not exactly any the wiser on where to go, but now they have a kid who can hopefully guide them forward. And I guess now I will turn on the spoiler warning for my players. So if you, my players, see this warning, this yellow arc spoiler warning down that way, that means you can watch this video once you guys get back to Eden and the arc is over. You can probably even watch it like once, you know, once you move on to the next thing. Once you leave this town, it's safe to watch this. I know, Mike, I don't have my stuff set up still. I don't have my commands. I'm so lazy. Oh, these things happen when you only stream once every 2 weeks. I will I'll be better soon though. So the next thing, I think the session went really well. I think everyone actually had fun that time. Yeah, they got far, but not as far as I expected. They already, they technically cleared one floor of this church. The most boring floor, granted. But one floor of this church before this session even started. And it took we went over, it took 4.5 hours to clear this set of rooms and this set of rooms, which, it's not a small amount of stuff. But, yeah, they belabored a couple of points, kind of rightfully so, I guess. Totally fine with me. They can spend as long as they want talking about what to do with the kid and how creepy torture room is. So yeah, it was a good time. Everyone was engaged. Going slow through this kind of thing just means that everyone's having fun and engaging with what's there. How did they find the trapdoor? Okay, so this one was already open. The head priestess kind of ran through here to get away from them. And once she heard fighting behind her, she opened the door, jumped down. She didn't care. How they found this door. One of the players, I believe it was my brother, it could have been Gino, just said, "I'm just jumping down." I was like, all right. Because this square links up to this square, right? So he's like, "I'm just going to jump down." It's like, all right, you're not climbing down or anything? You're just going for it? And they're like, yes. It's like, all right. You land, the floor gives way under you, and you fall through another trapdoor. And that is how they discovered this final-ish trapdoor. This other one over here was pretty obvious once they were in the basement. There's a metal pole hanging down that acts as a way for them to open the door from below, and also to climb up. But yeah, there's a whole I wanted them to get close to this dungeon. This is going to take so long. So long. Maybe they'll smash through it, but this is floor 1 of a 2-floor dungeon that they have yet to get through, which is why I say maybe there's 3 sessions left in this adventure. Yeah, it'll take a while. The second floor is what we will be working on today, which I need to